Welcome to the FedLife podcast with Dan Sipe from Serving Those Who Serve. In this podcast, Dan draws from years of financial experience to help federal employees overcome challenges that every Fed can relate to. Join us for this journey as we reach, teach, and serve to help you make the right financial decisions. Now, on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the FedLife podcast, where we try to cover all the things that will help you in your Fed life, and by that we mean your life as a career federal employee. I'm your host today. I'm Dan Sipe. I'm also the branch manager here at Serving Those Who Serve and Lee Sipe and Associates. I'm really excited about today's show, and especially our guest. But first, as is my practice, to all my feds listening, thank you for your service. You just don't hear it enough. And I also have to make sure that I thank our guest because he is also a career Fed. And I'm not sure anyone has done more to help teach feds about the things that matter and the things that they should need to know in their career than Ed Zurndorfer. If you've read any articles on your federal benefits and federal retirement the last 10 years, there's a really good chance a number of them were from Ed. So I'll have to take a deep breath here, but I want to do a quick rundown of Ed's credentials. So Ed is a certified financial planner, a chartered federal employee benefits consultant, a chartered financial consultant, a certified employee benefits specialist. Additionally, he is an enrolled agent, so he represents taxpayers before the IRS. He is a member of the Maryland Society of Accountants, the National Association of Enrolled Agents, the International Society of Certified Employee Benefits Specialists, the Financial Planning Association, the National Association of Health Writers, and the Society of Financial Service Professionals. Wow, Ed, you've done a lot. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure being here on FedLife. Thank you.
So most folks know you as Ed Zurndorfer, the author and the authority. So I thought it might be fun to sort of take a look back to the path that brought you to becoming that person. As I mentioned in the opener, you yourself are a career Fed. What drew you to federal service, and when and where did you start?
Dan, I started in 1974, and I was 23 years old at the time. And the main reason I started in federal services, my late father was a printer. He was a member of a union, and he was in charge of the benefits for the union. He would negotiate with management, and he did this for about 30 years. And he said to me, Ed, I think you should take a type of job where you don't have to fight for your benefits, where your benefits are there. And it's there for the taking. They'll be there as long as you are working. And that employer, I call it the federal government. I've heard so many things about the federal government, and there are wonderful opportunities that you have working in federal service and the benefits associated with it, where everything is there for you for the taking and with no negotiation in terms of salary and other important benefits. That was 45 years ago.
So, wow, it even started from the benefits side back then with some wise and prudent advice from Pops.
That is correct, Dan. And I just want to mention that things were very different when I first started in federal service. I remember when I started in federal service, they sat us down in orientation. They said to us, you're here in federal service. Welcome to the federal government. And all you have to do is your job, because a certain percentage of your paycheck will go into a retirement system known as the Civil Service Retirement System. You have one health insurance plan out there that'll fit all your needs called Blue Cross Blue Shield. There was no dental insurance. There was no vision insurance. There was no long-term care insurance. There was no thrift savings plan. You didn't have to make any choices whatsoever. Everything was there, and all they told you to do is just do your job. And 30 years from now, you'll be able to retire comfortably with a good pension that's guaranteed for the rest of your life. And that made a real impression on me.
Sure. Well, that was back in the days where planning for your life and your retirement was counting to 40. if you managed 40 years in, actually 41 years and 11 months, you got the 80% pension. Now, one of the things that I touched on in your intro, and people may have recognized it, they may not, and I thought it was an interesting question to ask. You're an enrolled agent, and what does that mean?
Enrolled agent with the IRS means that individuals who sit down and study for a 2-day exam and pass the exam that's given by the Internal Revenue Service that covers every aspect of taxation, individual, partnership, corporate, and tax law. And if you pass the exam, you're able to represent taxpayers in case of a dispute with the IRS. I have a tax practice, and I do about 150 to 200 tax returns per year. And if a client of mine has a dispute with the IRS for the tax return, I'm able to represent that taxpayer, giving a power of attorney. The client gives me a power of attorney, and I can go before the IRS by myself, representing the taxpayer in any dispute without the taxpayer having to go with me. So and the IRS recognizes an enrolled agent, someone who can represent a taxpayer in case of dispute. CPAs and tax attorneys also have that ability to represent taxpayers, but the enrolled agent is someone who took a specific exam given by the IRS and passed that exam, and that allows them to practice before. It's called practice before the IRS in case of any disputes with clients.
Wow, bless your heart for doing that.
And there are disputes.
Sure. Now, I'm curious, you got the wise counsel from your dad, go to a place where you don't have to fight for your benefits. When you first started, were you keenly interested in studying about your benefits and knowing them backwards and forwards, even from your early years?
You know, Dan, in the early years, that was not necessary, but things started to change in the 80s. Probably 10 years into my career, something was created called FERS, the Federal Employees Retirement System.
Sure.
And with the creation of FERS came the fact that federal employees had to start making choices about their benefits in terms of health insurance. More plans were being offered. Many of these plans did not cover anything in terms of all the expenses that an employee or family member would incur. Thus was created something called flexible spending accounts, and no one knew about those back in those days. There were dental insurance, vision insurance, long-term care insurance. The thrift savings plan started in the late 80s, in which employees had to make choices. So at that point, I started thinking, well, employees have to make choices. It's not going to be put before them. Who's going to help them make those choices? And I developed a keen interest. I went back to my days when my father used to negotiate the benefits with the management on behalf of the union. What choices are there, and what will best help an employee in terms of making the choice that will benefit the employee and the family member? And this probably started in the mid 80s, and it has continued until this day.
Okay. Did you kind of become the answer person in your office, where if somebody was stuck, they'd say, "Oh, you better ask Ed"?
Initially, it was only insurance questions and tax questions. Things changed tax-wise in terms of how federal pensions were taxed in the late 80s, and a lot of questions came up at that time in terms of how's my annuity going to be taxed, how's my thrift savings plan going to be taxed. And then, of course, at that time, there were more insurances being offered. What's the best insurance for me? How do I choose a plan? What do I need to do?
Sure. And it's funny you mentioned that. Going to go off script a little bit here. For the folks who listen, I've been doing this about 30 years, so I've been around the federal space for a long time. And when I first had the occasion to sit with Ed, I was telling him my story, which a lot of you have heard, that my father-in-law died suddenly, and I married into a family of 4 girls, 5 heads turned towards me. Well, as I was telling that story, there was a point where Ed got a very serious look on his face, and he goes, "How old was your father-in-law when he died?" And I told him. He goes, "What year was that?" And I told him, and he goes, "Okay. And how long was he retired when he died?" And I told him what my best guess on that, because I didn't have that part cold. And he said, "Okay. And your mother-in-law got a survivorship?" "Yes." "And she has a adult disabled daughter?" "Yes." "And she's receiving an annuity?" "Yes." He goes, "Okay. Your wife and your mother-in-law has passed?" "Yes." "Your wife, as your sister-in-law's guardian, will need to file a certain form, because when your father-in-law retired, the first part of the pension came out as your contributions, so they were tax-free. And if he didn't live long enough to receive all of those, it then rolled to your mother-in-law, but then it becomes pro rata. So it's possible if your wife files that form, there could be a small lump sum for the benefit of your sister-in-law. And I just remember looking at him saying, why do you still know that? I mean, this has been a long time since that was the rules. And Ed has subsequently explained that there was 1 year in there where that flipped over and everybody wanted to talk about that. So that's my fun favorite Ed story. So walk us through how you began to move from just knowing about it and helping your buddies in the office to where you were writing about and then teaching about federal benefits.
Very interesting question. I look back and I remember in the late 80s, there was a radio show in this town that came on Sunday morning, and the gentleman who was the moderator of that show would answer questions from listeners who would ask questions about finances. This person was actually had a PhD in finance and taught at a local university. And many times the questions that came in from federal employees were dealing with taxes, and he wouldn't know the answer. And I would call in and say, so-and-so, this is the answer to the question. We got to know one another. And one of the things he said to me is, he said, well, you seem to have a head on your shoulder for finance. Are you a certified financial planner? I said, no. And he said, I think it'd be in your best interest to become a CFP and get a securities license. So both of which I got within the next couple of years. And we got very friendly. And this person also wrote for a local federal newspaper. And he said to me that he wants to give it up and he's going to suggest that I take it over. He gave my name to that person. So I started writing articles about federal employee benefits in this newspaper. And he also said to me that he did seminars for federal employees for a local vendor in which he taught federal employee benefits. And he was also wanted to give that up. So he gave my name to that vendor, and that vendor hired me as to do it on a trial basis to teach financial planning for federal employees, and it slowly developed into teaching federal benefits to employees. So I really owe this to this one person who continues to ask me questions, by the way, about taxes and federal employee benefits. He's still in practice.
Well, why would he not, Ed?
And I'm forever grateful he pushed me into this field, because a lot of the designations that you mentioned, Dan, I have to owe it to him that he really pushed me to get these designations to help better understand all the aspects of federal employee benefits.
Okay, so, and I think I'm correct from the conversations that we've had. You were in active federal service, and you were also writing and beginning to teach. Is that correct?
Yes. There was an overlap of about 10 years between the time I started teaching and writing these columns and the time I retired. Okay. I was doing it on a very part-time basis. Because being a full-time employee, I couldn't devote my entire time to writing and to teaching. So I did it on a part-time basis. But once I retired, and this was about 10 years after I started, I became teaching and publishing became full-time in addition to my tax practice.
Got it. So was that a decision that you pretty well had locked down, saying, okay, I'm getting ready to put my paperwork in to retire, but I really want to stay with the teaching and the publishing because it's something that I think I should do, something I enjoyed. What was the real driver for that?
Absolutely. The driving was, I want to do something in retirement that I enjoy. This is not work. I enjoy this, and I enjoy helping employees understand their benefits. I enjoy helping employees knowing the employee knows what he or she needs to have in order to retire and what they're going to have in retirement. I always say, this is not a job for me. I wouldn't call it a hobby, but I would definitely call it something that I've always dreamed about doing.
Well, having seen you in action, I could definitely attest to the fact that when I see you, it feels like a mission when I see you work. So that brings me to a couple of questions that I probably wouldn't ask of a lot of people that I've seen present. For example, when you step up in front of that room, what's the most important thing that you want to accomplish in that workshop for the benefit of the folks that are coming?
The most important thing I want to accomplish when I stand up in a workshop at the beginning of the day, I say to myself, at the end of the day, I want the participants to walk out saying, gee, I understood that. I know what I have to do. What was presented to me was not above my head. This is all for me. It was presented what I need to do. I jokingly say, if I have an employee who comes in, a participant who comes in, beginning and says, I am determined to retire in this month, this year, and the person ends up walking out saying, gee, I'm not really ready to retire yet, I say to myself, yes, I did my job. Because I made it clear to the employee is not ready to retire. I feel I've done my job.
Yep. Sometimes you got to give them a new dream. Now, I know with your time in and the number of times that you've been in front of people when you've been writing, you've helped a lot of feds. Is there any one or a couple of situations that stand out over your career from the rest where you just really, really feel great about how you were able to help someone?
Yes, one stands out. I'm chuckling because it was very similar to what happened with your father-in-law. A couple of years ago, I got an email from an individual who said her father was retired under CSRS in 1992 with 36 years of federal service, includes military service. Her mother died in 1985, so her father was receiving a CSRS annuity, self-only, no survivor benefit, just for himself. And then he died back in 2005, after 13 years of federal retirement. She said to me, I guess I'm not entitled to anything. I said, wait a minute. When did he retire? 1992. When did he die? With no survivor benefit? 2005. I think you are entitled to something because your father did not get back all of the contributions he put into the civil service retirement system. I know that for a fact because I know he was retired. The way they gave back the contributions was spread over his life expectancy. Maybe 25, 30 years. He died 13 years into retirement. So some family member was entitled to get whatever was not paid back of his contributions into the civil service retirement system.
Sure.
To make a long story short, I asked her, did your father ever fill out the form? This form, I gave her the form number, standard form 2808. She said, I don't know, but I will check. He kept good records. So I said, well, you let me know. Come back to me. She got back to me a few days later. She said he filled out the form, never filed it, but he kept it in the house. And he named myself and my sister as beneficiaries of whatever was left in the civil service retirement system. Make a long story short, I told her what to do, file that form with a death certificate. About 2 months later, she emails me. Both she and her sister got a check for about $75,000 each because there was $150,000 left over. And this made my day, knowing that the money was sitting out there not to be distributed. OPM cannot do anything with the money until they're contacted, and I felt that I did a tremendous service to this individual.
I would have to agree with you on that one.
It made my day.
I believe you, and that's actually kind of a nice bridge to my next question, because I've watched a lot of presenters. I've been doing this for 30 years, but it's pretty clear to me that you really enjoy it, that you have a lot of fun up there, and one of the things I'll tell you, folks, if you have the chance to see Ed live, he's going to surprise you when he's funny, because he's got all these credentials. He's this tremendous academic, and then he comes out with these funny little turns of a phrase, and the whole room breaks up. But the reason I say it that way is it really seems to me like it's more than just a speaking job when I watch you up there.
Yes, as I said earlier, Dan, this is not a job. This is enjoyment. And when I wake up in the morning knowing I'm going to do a seminar, oh, great, another opportunity to help employees get to this business of how to retire.
Sure, and you're really spot on about how things changed with the introduction of FERS. You and I have talked about it, that when FERS came in, it was introduced as a three-legged table or three-legged stool, with the FERS pension, TSP, Social Security. And we've felt for years, and it's sort of a battle cry here, that there's actually another leg in there, and that's strategy. What do you do when? And you're a big part of helping people understand that. Do you have a favorite topic within CSRS or FERS that you like to teach on?
I really do, Dan, and it's called appreciating the CSRS or FERS annuity, appreciating what you have.
Okay.
Because I'm getting the CSRS annuity, and believe me, I really appreciate it because being the fact it's a guaranteed pension with some inflation protection is a blessing. As I point out during all the seminars, one problem that no one who is in this room will have once he or she retires from federal service. You'll never run out of money in retirement because the federal government guarantees with this annuity, whether it's CSRS or FERS, you're going to get a check for life. I cannot say that if I go into a room teaching people who work in private industry because they don't have defined benefit plans. Yep. They're gone. If a company offers a pension plan, it's going to be in the form of a defined contribution plan, like a 401k plan, in which there is no guarantee. And so we were very blessed, and I really get excited talking about it for the simple reason that knowing that employees will have this guaranteed income. Unfortunately, not a lot of employees. Sometimes I run into employees. Oh, I didn't know I had that.
Really?
They're not educated on the fact they don't realize what's coming out of their paycheck every payday, which is a relatively small amount of money for this guaranteed pension.
We've got work to do together, my friend. Then, another thing that, again, another favorite Ed moment here, and it struck me the very first time I saw you, and it continues. I noticed that pretty quickly you seem to know the names of the folks in the room, and you address them by name, not just when they ask questions, but you remember what they asked you earlier, and you'll have a tie-in that brings you back to them. Have you always been able to do that, or is that a cool skill that's sort of grown over time? Well,
Dan, name tags help, and so does vitamin D.
Oh, okay.
Which I take every day.
All right, then I need better glasses. I need vitamin D.
Yes. Sometimes the print is a little small.
Okay.
I do like to address people by their name. It makes it more personal when they ask the question. It makes them feel more comfortable.
Okay. Last question for Ed the Guru. You've really touched on it a lot, but I really want to put you on the spot with a direct question here. It's so clear you have a passion for this. Why? Why is it so important to you?
Well, Dan, in my private life, I'm a religious person.
Mm-hmm. I know that.
There's a God out there who's looking over us,
Amen.
Put us on this earth for a purpose. And I feel my purpose on this earth is to help people. And the way I'm helping them is to help them to prepare for retirement. And God has given me the skills to do this, the ability to speak, the ability to understand, and to teach. And I want to make the most of it while I can. And that's why it's so important for me to do many of these seminars as possible and to do as much writing as possible, to communicate, to let people know what they have and why it's so important that they have these benefits.
That's awesome. Okay, so now we're gonna go into uncharted territory because people have been reading stuff by Ed Zurndorfer. They have seen videos of him. They've listened to him on things. I might be the first person to be asking these questions, so I'm a little bit excited about this. So let's switch gears and give folks a chance to learn about Ed the person. So you're a family man. Would you care to share anything about the fam? I know you're a proud father and grandfather.
I have 4 grown children, all married. I have 2 sons, 2 daughters, 2 sons-in-laws, 2 daughters-in-laws, and 13 grandchildren.
Oh, nice. One of Ed's favorite things in a seminar to say is, ask me how many grandchildren I have. And his answer always is?
Not enough.
Not enough. And are they close, or do you travel to see them?
All of them live out of town.
Okay.
And so I have to travel to see them. So we find it time to travel and make the most of it because it's a lot easier for my wife and I to travel to them than in order for them to travel to us.
Sure. So what do you like to do for fun?
I like to exercise to keep myself in shape and to go to museums. We're blessed here in Washington with museums that are still free. Take advantage of it. So So I try to visit as many
So
museums.
is that across the board, or so for example, is Air and Space Museum on equal footing with the Corcoran with you? Or?
They're all, but mostly science museums.
Sure.
Science, American history, natural history
museum.
Museum.
Smithsonian. You're a Smithsonian guy.
So they all appeal to me. They're all.
Well, you're preaching to the choir there, because in the early stages of my career, when we first started having children and things like that, and my wife had stopped working, there would be times that she would accompany me to go downtown, because pre 9/11 you could actually meet somebody at their office without having to have a passport, and so we would spend time in the afternoons when I was done going through the various museums. And I remember when my son was, probably 10 years old and got to see John Glenn's capsule at the Air and Space Museum. And he just kept looking at it going, "That's really small, Dad." And I went, "Yep, brave guys." Okay, last part. And this is a fun thing I like to do that I call the lightning round. So I'm just going to fire a quick question at you. Give me the first thing that comes back. And by the end of this, people will know even a little bit more about you. Okay, you ready?
Ready.
Favorite food?
Healthy pasta.
Prefer to cook it or order it?
Cook it.
What's your favorite place to visit?
Virginia Beach.
Okay. Sports or arts?
Oh, we'll go for sports.
Sports, okay. Favorite athlete?
I'm a Baltimore Bull. I grew up in Baltimore. It's a tie. Cal Ripken or Brooks Robinson.
Oh, wow. Two great picks. No Johnny Unitas in there?
Oh, I had Johnny Unitas. Sorry.
Yeah, got us Johnny
Unitas.
What's your preferred pet?
Dog.
What is your preferred method of exercise?
Going on the treadmill.
Okay. And would you prefer to tell a joke or hear a joke?
Hear
a joke. Okay. If you had the power to snap your fingers and fix one thing, what would it be?
My computer.
Okay. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, if you're listening,
yes.
Steve, in the hereafter, can you help Ed with that? Who's your hero?
My wife, who's my administrative assistant. Can't do anything without her.
Oh, wow.
Okay. She keeps me on my toes.
Okay. So when I send you a thank you basket, I should really send it to her then.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm on it. Who's your favorite person in history?
FDR. And I want to mention why.
Okay, sure.
FDR was president, and under him came Social Security. He pushed Social Security, not as a retirement system, but there to supplement one's retirement. He was a rich man. He had nothing to gain. It was all, for the poor people. He thought about the poor person.
Sure.
And that's why I admired him. So all the programs he started, Medicare started later, but he pushed it. And again, because of his background, he didn't have to do this. And I admired him to no end because of that.
I certainly understand that. It's one of the things that I tend to geek out on is history. And right now I'm in a really, really good Audible book. It's called These Truths, and it goes all the way back to colonial times forward. And what was fascinating to me when they were covering the era with FDR, and I never understood the why of it. He never wanted to be photographed or filmed in his wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And he had a series of braces and things like that to allow him to stand. It was because he felt it was his job. He felt it was his job to stand for the people that had put him in office, and that they would see that he was healthy and strong and would have confidence in the republic. And I thought that was very, very interesting. So last question, was this fun?
Of course.
Okay, boom. That's 11 things more that you did not know about the guru at Zurndorfer. And now I have an endorsement that my podcast is fun. I'd like to let you know you can see Ed live every month at 4 convenient locations in the DMV with his Understanding Your Federal Retirement Benefits seminar. For information and to register, please visit www.stwserve.com. Click Seminars and Events. Ed Live is not to be missed. Ed, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Folks, Ed will be back as a regular here on FedLife. We've got some things coming up having to do with the changes that will be coming to TSP. Will be some of the next episodes here. So Ed has some great information on that. Please be sure to share this with your friends and strangers. and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So every time we come out with a new piece of thought leadership, you'll be notified. Ed, did you know we were thought leaders? I thought we were just old guys.
I did not know that.
So for Ed Zurndorfer and all of us here at Serving Those Who Serve, thank you for listening to the FedLife podcast. Watch for Ed's articles in the Fed Zone at stwserve.com. We are Serving Those Who Serve. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. This is Dan saying good luck and Godspeed. And above all, remember, it's your Fed life. Make it a great one because you deserve it. We are out.
Thank you for listening to the FedLife podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Serving Those Who Serve or Raymond James. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors Incorporated. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services.
Neither Raymond James Financial Services nor any Raymond James financial advisor renders advice on tax issues. These matters should be discussed with the appropriate professional. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or loss regardless of strategy selected, including diversification and asset allocation.
Raymond James is not affiliated and does not endorse the opinions or services of any of the quoted professionals or their respective firms. Any opinions are those of Dan Sipe and not necessarily those of RJFS or Raymond James. This case study is for illustrative purposes only. Individual cases will vary.